Hi, I'm Reverend Wendy Craig-Purcell here at the Unity Center in San Diego. Thank you so much for watching today. If you'd like to support the work that we do here, please consider making a contribution. Go to our website. It's easy to do. Thank you in advance for that contribution. This month I had wanted to select as a theme sacred activism, and I brought back a book I had read a number of years ago, a book written by Andrew Harvey. The title of it is The Hope, and it's all about the hope is linked to the activation of sacred activism in our lives. And what does that mean, and how do we do that? Our hope for a better world, for a world that is healed and that is whole and is holy, is truly dependent upon our engagement with it, grounded in spiritual understanding. And not only grounded in spiritual understanding, but understanding that is supported and motivated by love and wisdom. And so that's what I want to talk about today, and remind us of and challenge us to build a greater capacity for love and a greater expression of wisdom. In the introduction to the book, Elizabeth Lesser, who is a co-founder of the Omega Institute, said these words about Harvey's work. She writes, "If God created a new curriculum for the human race, one that might ensure our continued place on this planet, I think God would make the hope required reading." Andrew Harvey's wise and joyous prose brings home the necessary union, of spiritual practice and radical action. The union of spiritual practice and radical action. But it does much more than that, she writes. It makes us want to roll up our sleeves and get to work. It seduces us to create change from the inside out, or as Gandhi said, to be the peace we long to see in the world. Spiritual practice, that's what we're about. And we also need to be about radical action. And that radical action that we take in our lives is not going to look the same for each of us. It's going to be unique to what breaks our heart open. It's going to be unique to our life experience, our history, what we know, the skills we can bring into making the world a better place. Every Sunday as you enter into this room, if you look up, you see our mission statement. And it is twofold. It is transforming lives, meaning our individual lives. It does, in fact, start with us. Just as Gandhi said, we must be the peace we wish to see in the world. We must be the change we wish to see in the world. But it must not stop with the work, the good and important work that we do within ourselves. It needs to extend to the work between us. And that's where the second part of our mission of healing our world with love is so very necessary. It's not a one or the other, it's both and. And so our focus today is essentially that as a species, we need to develop our love and wisdom equal to the technological and force powers that we have developed in the world. That we need to develop love and wisdom as strong and powerful as all of the weaponry we have, as advanced as all of the technology we have. Perhaps you remember a statement from Martin Luther King Jr. when he spoke about the idea that we have guided missiles but misguided men. That's what we're really talking about. What we're really talking about. That our love and wisdom has to grow to be equal in strength and power. As I was going back looking over this lesson, I was reminded of something I had read about the scientists who worked on the atomic bomb, Oppenheimer and Einstein and some of the others after the launching of that bomb had serious regrets. While at one hand they understood the importance of ending Nazism, they had regret about that second bomb and what it really meant, that we had reached a point as people, an evolutionary point as people, of the ability to annihilate ourselves. And yet what was, and I think still is, lagging is the heart skill, the spiritual skill, the spiritual might, the love, and the wisdom. In this book, Harvey warns about being too naive right now. He suggests that we dare not be naive about the power of destructiveness at our hands, and that we must not turn away and pretend that it doesn't exist. It does. But what are we going to do about it? His Holiness the Dalai Lama has said, now is not the time to pretend that everything is all right. Now is not the time to pretend that everything is all right. And as I say this, I realize I'm saying this in a unity church, in a New Thought church. I've grown up spiritually in these unity New Thought teachings. And we emphasize the good. We choose to look for the good. We choose to amplify it, to call it forth. But sometimes I think we have completely misunderstood that, or taken that to an extreme in which we think it means that it is somehow wrong to acknowledge and to look at and to see what is wrong. It's not always pleasant to look at and see what is wrong or what is not working, correct? I mean, isn't it easier in our own lives to say, I don't want to look at the stuff in my life that's not working. I don't want to look at what my scale is saying after COVID, or I don't want to look at what the doctor is telling me might need to be changes that I make. I don't want to look too closely at my finances. I don't want to look and see something that wouldn't put a big smile on my face. But this is also true of us as a people looking out at the world. Sometimes we don't want to look. And the shadow side, or the danger side, I think, of our teaching is if we say, well, I'm only going to focus on the positive. We have to hold it all and never lose faith as we look at what currently exists. Now is not the time to pretend that everything is all right. So then what are we to do? It's easy when we start looking to feel overwhelmed, isn't it? Very easy when we start looking to feel overwhelmed. When you look out, what do you see that is not all right in the world around you? Hold that thought for a moment. Notice what comes to your mind. When you look out, what do you see that is not all right? If you listen to the news, you hear about our environment, about global warming. You hear about the classroom to prison pipeline. You hear about racial inequities, racism in our country. We hear about the widening gap of those that have and those that have not. We hear about challenges with LGBTQ rights, transgender rights. We can take it all in and be aware of it and see so much that is not all right. What is ours to do is not to be overwhelmed by everything that we may be aware of as we seek to understand the world we live in today. And every spiritual teacher, I believe, has sought to understand the world that they lived in. Jesus absolutely sought to understand the world he lived in and the challenges that his people around him were having. Gandhi certainly did. Martin Luther King certainly did. Founders, I think, of all the world's major religions did. They had a relationship with God by whatever name they called God, but they could look out and see where people were hurting and suffering in their time. And we are called, those of us who are on a spiritual journey, this kind of spiritual journey, we are called to look out at what is not right in our world and to notice what grabs our heart. And so I imagine if I were to ask each and every one of you of the long list of things that we might name as being not right, that needs to be fixed or healed, if I were to ask you which is the one that breaks your heart open, I bet our answers would be varied. And that's a good thing. It only becomes a problem if we start fighting with each other. No, my issue is more important than your issue. And then we're pulling against each other instead of acknowledging that if each one of us is doing what we can, we will be living out this second part of our mission statement. What is also true about that is when we begin to apply ourselves with love and wisdom to the issues in the world that we care about, we grow. We grow. We cannot help but grow. And some of those issues that we may be feeling pulled into to make a difference may require of us a great deal of courage. We might feel small to the task. You mean that's what I'm supposed to work on, God? You mean that's where I'm supposed to play a part? But what happens if we are anchored in this spiritual teaching and practice, what happens is we are given the power and the courage to say yes and to do the part that is ours. Sacred activism, which is what Harvey's book, The Hope, is really all about. Sacred activism is activism that is born from soul force. Activism that is born from soul force. Say that with me. Activism that is born from soul force. I don't know if Martin Luther King Jr. was the first to use that term, but when I hear that term or read it, he's the first that I think about. He epitomized soul force. Soul force is force that is guided by love and wisdom. It's not the kind of love that you read about on the Hallmark cards. They're beautiful. I love them. I can spend hours picking the right Mother's Day card for my mom or people. But that's not the kind of love that we're talking about here. In fact, in our Bible, there are 4 Greek words to express what we express under the one word love. And one of those 4 words is agape, which means a universal love. That is the love that is beneath soul force. And we must understand that right there with love must be a balance of wisdom. We can gain wisdom by experience, the school of hard knocks. We can gain wisdom by deep reflection and understanding. We can gain wisdom in our prayer life by asking to be guided and directed in what is the next right step for us personally or collectively. We're talking about love in action that is guided by wisdom. As I was thinking about that yesterday, I was reminded of one of my favorite stories in the Old Testament, and it's the story of King Solomon, and it's a story about his wisdom. There were 2 women who lived in the same household, and both gave birth at just about the same time. But one woman gave birth to a stillborn child. And the next day or a few days later, they both came to Solomon because the woman who had given birth to the stillborn baby stole the other woman's baby. And the rightful mother wanted her baby back. Do you remember how the story goes? Some of you do, and some of you may not remember. And so they go to King Solomon to ask him to decide who is the rightful mother. And King Solomon says, "Give me the baby. Let me take a sword, and I will cut the baby in half and give each mother half." And of course, the mother, who was the rightful mother, screamed and said, "Give the other woman the baby. Let the baby live." And of course, Solomon knew in that instant, in that wise moment, motivated by love, he knew who the rightful mother was. In our prayer life, if we pray for and seek to be guided in wisdom, we will begin to find that we are in fact guided in that way. We have fallen, I think, as a people into so many blunderous ways of living, so many things that we've got kind of backwards or incomplete. I was remembering, my husband John Purcell may remember this too. Years ago, we were blessed in our community to have the grandson of Mahatma Gandhi, Arun Gandhi, with us on a couple of occasions, and some of you were with us. Shortly before Mahatma Gandhi's death, on one of the last visits that Arun had had with his grandfather, Mahatma Gandhi had given Arun a slip of paper, handwritten paper, on which Gandhi had written the 7 blunders of the world. And as I was rereading those this weekend, I thought, this is part of the problem that we are still living with today. Let me share the 7 blunders of the world and see if you think Gandhi was right. Wealth without work. Pleasure without conscience. Knowledge without character. Commerce without morality. Science without humanity. Worship without sacrifice. Politics without principle. Think he had a pretty good list? I think he had a very good list. And then Arun added an 8th one. Only the grandson of the Mahatma would have the audacity to do something like that. But Arun added an 8th one, and that was rights without responsibilities. I love that one. Rights without responsibilities. Humanity can tend to be so enamored of our rights, so clear on what are our rights. Heck, we just celebrated 4th of July and reminded ourselves of our unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And yes, those are our rights, not just those of us born in white skin, but all of us, aspirationally at least, and it needs to be made manifest. However, those rights must be followed and supported by what? Responsibility, right? And that's what we're about. We'll talk a little bit more about this next point next week, but I want to inject it here, because to do our part of the work, whatever breaks your heart open, whatever beyond your own needs that you have in your personal life, beyond those, whatever breaks your heart open when you consider the issues in the world, whatever that is, it's going to require some action on your part. It's not just enough to identify it and name it, oh, I care about X. We need to put our feet beneath whatever that X is. It's going to require that we take care of ourselves spiritually. And this is where I think the whole idea of sacred activism is so very different than what might be typically looked at as activism. Sacred activism is grounded in love and wisdom, and it comes up out of our spiritual practice. It's dependent. It's dependent upon the quality of our spiritual practice. It was said about Martin Luther King Jr. that the primary rhythm that sustained him for the long haul of his leadership was the rhythm of prayer and action, action and prayer. I like that phrase, the rhythm of prayer and action, action and prayer. I believe Mother Teresa used to say that the more she felt that she had to do in her day, the more and greater her responsibilities, the heavier the task at hand, the more time in prayer she needed to spend. I found myself, as I was working on this yesterday again, thinking, no wonder why I feel a certain kind of tiredness that I've been feeling. It's because the things I have said yes to that are deeply important to me in the work that I and our community are doing in the world to help heal our world, I have not amplified my prayer time. My prayer time has been consistent, but it has not been ramped up to meet the growing expectation of what I feel is pulling at my heart. And so I'm encouraged by, number one, just having that aha moment. I've been in this work long enough to appreciate that when I have an aha moment and I can name, oh, that's the piece that I need to do, that I will quickly do that piece. It's just getting clarity around what that piece is. So I don't know what your work is. I pray with all my heart and soul that you will say yes to whatever it is that moves your heart, because I know that it's people like you and those on our broadcast that are being called into this time to help heal the hurts in our world. This is deeply, deeply, deeply spiritual work. What did Jesus say? They'll know you are my disciples by how well you love each other. He sent them out to share a message, but he told them to clothe and to feed and to help and to heal. So what falls under the banner of the needs in our world, in our time? We don't have to do it all. We can't do it all. But every single one of us can and must be doing something. And so I think the world right now is hungering for decisive and loving action. Decisive and loving action. And love in action is doing the right thing at the right time in the right spirit. Love in action is doing the right thing at the right time and in the right spirit. I hope we're joining together to say yes to that. Namaste.